It was a quiet village tucked away from the chaos of city life. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and where reputations mattered more than money. In one humble home lived a young woman named Fatima. She was more than just a daughter. She was a blessing, a light in the darkness for her widowed mother. Fatima had memorized the entire Quran. She never missed a prayer. She lived simply, worked honestly, and treated everyone with kindness. Her days were spent sewing clothes for women in the village, using her hands not just for craft, but for survival. She and her mother lived off the money she earned from stitching clothes. People in the village respected her deeply. They would say, "That girl, she's different. She doesn't just follow religion, she lives it." But none of them knew that the very hands that stitched with such honesty, the very lips that spoke verses of the Quran, would one day be the source of a terrifying mystery, one that would haunt every soul in that village. Fatima had a strict principle. She refused to sew clothes that revealed too much. Sleeveless blouses, short pants. She would turn them down immediately. "How can I contribute to something that goes against modesty?" she would say, again and again. Even when customers begged her, offering double the price, she would politely decline. "I sew what aligns with my values," she would say, standing tall in her beliefs. Eventually, she got married. Her husband was a simple, honest man who agreed to live with Fatima and her mother, as she was the only child. Their life wasn't easy. Money was always tight. But they made it work, with love, faith, and shared struggle. Soon, Fatima became pregnant. Her husband lost his job around the same time. She tried to stay strong, but the stress was unbearable. She kept sewing, even when her back hurt and her fingers ached. Her husband did what he could. He cooked for her, brought her tea, searched every day for work. Eventually, a daughter was born. She was beautiful. Her birth brought a moment of peace into their lives. Her husband got a new job. Things began to look up. But life has a way of testing the strongest hearts when they least expect it. One afternoon, as Fatima walked down the stairs, she slipped. The fall was brutal. Blood spilled from her head. Her mother screamed. Neighbors rushed in, and her husband, upon hearing the news, dropped everything and ran home. But it was too late. Before they could reach the hospital, Fatima was gone. Just like that, in a single moment, the heart of that home stopped beating. She had been a mother for just a few weeks. Her daughter would grow up without ever knowing her voice, her warmth, her smile. The pain was too much to bear. Her husband could barely speak. Her mother was shattered. And yet, the real story, the terrifying, unbelievable part, was only just beginning. That night, as they buried her, something happened that no one expected. And what they would uncover in the hours that followed would not only shake their faith, it would reveal a horrifying truth no one in the village could ignore. After the burial, the villagers returned to their homes. The silence that settled over Fatima's house was not just quiet, it was haunting. Her sewing machine stood still, the needle halfway through a dress she never finished. Her mother sat in front of it, staring, breaking into sobs every few minutes. She had buried her husband years ago. Now, her only daughter was gone too. All that remained was a tiny baby girl, still nursing, too young to understand she would never see her mother again. Fatima's husband, Furkan, tried to be strong. He held the baby close, rocked her to sleep, whispered gentle words to calm her cries. But inside, he was crumbling. He hadn't just lost a wife. He had lost his best friend, his support, the woman who had held their little family together. That night, Furkan decided he wouldn't go to work for the next few days. He wanted to stay home, to grieve, to take care of his daughter. As he reached into his pocket to call his boss, his fingers froze. The keys, they were gone. His heart skipped a beat. "I had them," he muttered. "I definitely had them." His mother-in-law looked at him, concerned. "What's wrong, Beta?" "I can't find the keys to the site," he said slowly. "I had them in my pocket. The last time I remember was at the burial," and then it hit him. He had stepped down into Fatima's grave to lower her body. That must have been the moment. Now, the keys to his contractor's warehouse, the keys that opened tools, materials, everything, were lost, buried with his wife. And Furkan's boss? He was the kind of man who fired people for being 1 minute late. There would be no forgiveness if the keys were gone. As he stood there trying to make sense of it all, his phone rang. It was the contractor. "I need the keys tonight," the man growled. "No excuses." Furkan's mouth went dry. "Yes, sir," he whispered. "I'll bring them in the morning." But he had no idea how. And so, as the village slept and the clock struck midnight, Furkan slipped out of the house with a flashlight in his hand, heading toward the cemetery. He had never stepped into a graveyard alone at night. The path was quiet, the wind cold. The moon cast eerie shadows over the tombstones, but he had no choice. He arrived at Fatima's grave, heart pounding, hands trembling. He began to dig, just a little, just near the side and by her feet, just enough to reach the keys. But he wasn't alone. "Hey!" a voice roared behind him. "What are you doing?" Furkan turned in fear. A flashlight hit his face. It was the gravekeeper. "I'm not stealing," Furkan pleaded. "I buried my wife here today. I think the keys fell from my pocket into her grave." The man stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he lowered his flashlight. You're the husband?" he asked, his voice softer now. "All right, I'll help you, but let's be quick." Together, the two men began to dig, carefully, respectfully, and then they saw her, Fatima's body. But something was wrong, terribly, horribly wrong. As soon as the light touched her face, Furkan gasped in horror. Then he fainted. Because what he saw wasn't his peaceful, pious wife. It was a woman in pain. Her lips were burning, literally burning. Fire danced across her mouth. She was screaming silently, her face twisted in agony. The rest of her body was untouched. But her lips were blistered, blackened, scorched. The gravekeeper dropped his tools and began to shake with fear. "What kind of woman was your wife?" he whispered. This is not normal." He rushed to refill the grave, panicked. "You need to pray for her," he said urgently. "Beg for her forgiveness. I don't know what sin she committed, but she's suffering, and it's real." Furkan stumbled home, shaking, barely able to walk. He collapsed in front of his mother-in-law and told her everything. And when she heard about the fire on Fatima's lips, her own lips began to tremble. Because what could a woman like Fatima, so devout, so pure, possibly have done to deserve this? That night, the house was filled with weeping, Fatima's mother cried like a child. Furkan sat frozen, his eyes red and hollow. The memory of the fire on his wife's lips, the silent scream, the blackened skin, haunted him. He could still hear her suffering echo in his ears. "Why only her lips?" he asked, over and over. She used those very lips to recite the Quran, to whisper prayers, to soothe our baby. Fatima's mother said, "We must speak to someone wiser, someone who can help us understand." And so, at the call of Fajr, Furkan waited at the mosque and quietly approached the Imam. With tears rolling down his cheeks, he told him everything about the keys, the grave, the fire. The Imam listened silently, his expression growing grave. "I knew Fatima," he said finally. "She memorized the Quran under my supervision. She was a righteous soul, but sometimes, even the smallest act can carry heavy consequences in the sight of Allah. I need to speak to her mother," he added. Later that morning, the Imam visited their home. Fatima's mother welcomed him, her hands shaking. "Tell me honestly," the Imam asked gently. "Did your daughter ever gossip? Did she speak ill of others? Was there anything she did that might have brought this punishment upon her lips?" Fatima's mother shook her head. "No, never. She barely spoke to anyone. She only focused on sewing ... She hardly ever left the house, let alone gossip." The Imam paused. "Did she ever keep anything that didn't belong to her? Maybe scraps of cloth, pieces of lace, even unintentionally?" Again, Fatima's mother said, "No. She always returned everything, even extra buttons or thread. She was so careful." But the Imam pressed on. "Think deeply. Is there any habit, even a small one, tied to her lips or mouth?" The room went silent. Then, after a moment, Fatima's mother said quietly, "There is one thing. She never used scissors to cut the thread while sewing. She used her teeth. She would bite the thread off, and sometimes the fibers would stick to her lips. She'd chew them a little and spit them out." The Imam closed his eyes, deeply troubled. This may be it," he whispered. "That thread may have belonged to her clients. It was part of the entrusted material. If she bit it and left fibers in her mouth, knowingly or not, it may be considered a breach of amana, a trust. In Islam," he continued, "even a scrap of cloth or thread left in our possession must be returned. If not, it's as if we took something that didn't belong to us." The room fell still. Fatima's mother felt the ground shift beneath her. Ya Allah, such a small habit. "It may be small to us," the Imam said gently, "but nothing is small in the eyes of Allah when it comes to trust, especially for someone as righteous as Fatima. She was held to a higher standard. Allah loved her. Maybe this was His way of cleansing her." The Imam advised, "Speak to the women she sewed for. Tell them, ask for their forgiveness." And so, trembling, Fatima's mother went door to door, gathering the women who had brought clothes to her daughter. She bowed her head, voice breaking, and said, "My daughter may have unintentionally kept tiny fibers of thread. Please forgive her." Most of the women began to cry. "This wasn't a sin to us," they said. "She was a gift. Of course, we forgive her." But in that moment, they all understood what seems insignificant to humans might be enormous in the eyes of God. That evening, Fatima's mother looked at Furkan and said, "I need to know. Please, go back, reopen her grave, see if the punishment has been lifted." And once again, in the quiet of the night, Furkan walked to the cemetery. This time, Furkan wasn't afraid. He wasn't haunted by shadows or shaken by the darkness. He had only one thing in his heart: a prayer. A silent, desperate prayer. Ya Allah, let her be at peace. The gravekeeper met him at the gate, surprised to see him again. Furkan explained everything: how Fatima's mother had spoken to the women, how they all forgave her, how the Imam believed the punishment had been for a minor breach of trust. The gravekeeper nodded solemnly. Without a word, he brought out the tools, and together they opened the grave again. As the final layer of soil was removed, Furkan closed his eyes. His heart trembled with hope and fear. And then, the moment he looked inside, he fell to his knees. But this time, he didn't faint. This time, he wept, because there lay Fatima, calm, beautiful, untouched. Her lips were no longer blackened. There was no fire, no marks of pain. Her face held a peaceful expression. A soft fragrance filled the air, like roses blooming in the middle of the night. And next to her, lying gently on the white cloth, were the lost keys. The gravekeeper stepped back, overwhelmed. "Subhanallah," he whispered. "She's free." Furkan picked up the keys and looked at his wife one last time. He wanted to speak, to say goodbye again, to say thank you for everything. But his voice failed him. His heart spoke for him instead. Together, they refilled the grave, and this time, the earth felt lighter. When Furkan returned home, Fatima's mother met him at the door. He didn't need to say anything. The tears in his eyes, the peaceful smile on his face, they told her everything. She raised her hands to the sky and cried out, "Ya Allah, thank you. Thank you for removing the punishment. Thank you for your mercy." That night, the news spread through the village like wildfire. People were stunned. A girl as righteous as Fatima, punished in the grave for something as small as chewing leftover thread. It shook them to the core, but it also woke them up. From that day forward, people in the village became extremely careful. They returned everything they borrowed, no matter how small. Buttons, threads, scraps of lace, even things they once thought didn't matter. Because now they knew it did matter. Fatima was gone, but her story became a warning, a reminder that even a tiny mistake can follow you to the grave. Her mother never forgot her. Her husband prayed for her every day, and her little daughter grew up hearing about her mother's honesty, her kindness, and the lesson she left behind. Fatima was like a flower, plucked too soon, but whose fragrance lingered in the hearts of everyone she had ever touched. May Allah grant her the highest place in paradise, and may we all remember never to betray a trust, no matter how small. Even a thread has weight in the eyes of the Almighty.